Join us and our friends as we fall down the rabbit hole of security wonder. If you're ready to see how deep it goes, you've found the right place. Pour your tea. You're not late for office hours. And now, our Red Queen, Tara Wheeler.
Hello, folks. It is, as always, such a pleasure to have you with us here for Red Queen's Cybersecurity Office Hours. I am thrilled this week to be joined by a friend and colleague, Jason Slagle. He's the president of CNWR IT Consultants, and he comes from a background in enterprise systems administration. Just like me, we've got a lot to talk about. Jason has a wealth of experience in Unix, Linux, server administration, networking, and system architecture. Jason enjoys building bike ramps, releasing CVEs, and drinking, he says coffee in the bio, but we'll have more of a conversation. Folks, it's such a pleasure to have you here with us this afternoon and morning. Jason, how's it going?
Oh, it's going. How are you doing?
I am having quite a week. I'm pissed off about AI and cyber, but that's, everybody in technology at this point. So... Oh man, we were just talking about this, Jason. What's going on with Copilot? I think a bunch of MSPs and dealing with that this week. Mm-hmm.
No, it's not. It's going to be forever, right? It's like you got all these small businesses that they migrate to SharePoint. They migrate their file servers with their crappy file server permissions to SharePoint with its crappy SharePoint permissions, and then they turn Copilot on. And now you have access to all this data, and which wasn't a problem before because no one was looking or snooping in theory, but now it happily indexes all of it. So you can ask it things like, hey, what does our president make salary wise? And it's probably in some Excel document somewhere, and Copilot will happily answer that question. And it's going to be fun for a while.
It's always file permissions. It's just file permissions all the way down, right? I know. I was thinking about this as I was talking to some folks yesterday about AI and cyber, and they were asking, what are the consequences of this? And I said, look, this is a lot like the Google PageRank algorithm. Mm-hmm. 20 years ago, Google comes out with this improved search, and every higher education official started flipping out, thinking all of a sudden students don't have to do their own homework anymore. The information is just there for them to find. They could copy things off the internet. It's really kind of the same panic again. And at the same time, it's just, if you don't want things out there, don't have the incorrect file permissions on them. And people who are running, the servers inside companies who don't know that they don't know enough to keep themselves secure, that scares me.
The real problem is, as an MSP, right? I think there's an expectation that I can go through and just, fix all your file share permissions, but I don't know enough about your data to know who should have access to what. And you don't want me opening every document in your file storage to try to figure out where I should sort them to, right? It's like, you don't want that. The people that own that data are the people that need to classify it, right? From a DLP and a file permissions perspective as to, how sensitive it is, who should have access to it. And this is going to be a problem for a long time, because it's not that people couldn't see it before, like I said earlier. It's that now they can very easily see it because it's indexed in AI, and you can just ask questions about it.
Mm-hmm. It's madly challenging to have this conversation with people. Oh, I love Stephen Jones. Jones, great, incredible person, VP of Cybersecurity over at Dataprise. Copilot is going to be fun. People are learning things they didn't know about their own organizations. And as a hacker, I kind of love uncomfortable conversations with people who left shit on the internet they shouldn't have left there, honestly.
Yeah. It's a little. Yep, it's fun. It's definitely going to be a little bit of an interesting ride, because those are really uncomfortable conversations the first times it happens. Because it's somebody comes to you, how could this happen? It's like, how could you put salary data in a file that everyone has read access to? Let's answer that question first, right? And almost always it predates us, or right, people just don't understand file permissions, and I get it.
Yeah, it's a mad challenge to have that conversation with people. And I often think about it as I think about sort of where we sit in the stack, right? I've given this example a couple of times. We're like the QuickBooks for compliance for small business. You don't ask QuickBooks for advice about your taxes. You ask your accountant, who uses a tool to help expose what's going on in your finances, right? And at the same time, you share this information with a service provider, and you have, but you still have the personal responsibility to make sure that you're being honest and operating to the best of your capacity, and not wanting to know about your own profile, whether financial or information security. It's not a defense anymore. Yeah. Thinking you can ignore it and it's going to go away. That's catching up to a lot of people, I think, right now.
Yeah. I mean, I'm willing to be your vCISO, right? Or a CISO. I'm willing to be your vCIO or CIO, right? If you're a small company. I don't know that I'm willing to be your privacy officer, right? Like I it's like I don't have enough, like I'm not locality to your data and your sensitivity to that. I can guide you as in wearing my CISO hat. I can guide you to make the right decisions, right? But like I don't want to be responsible for all of your data. I'll be responsible for securing it, but I'm not going to be responsible for classifying it.
Yeah. And there's also this expectation, I think, that a lot of SMBs have. A pretty typical kind of end client for one of our MSP customers might be like a 30-person trucking company in the middle of Iowa, right? Like they're starting to have to get into supply chains and fill out cybersecurity paperwork and compliance paperwork. And there's often this sort of demand that they'll reach out to their IT guy who can just fix it. And at this point, we're looking at things that just can't get fixed anymore. They can get cleaned up after, but that doesn't mean the spill didn't happen, right? That's, I think, the real challenge for a lot of people is making it real to them. I'm not sure how to do that. What's some of your good analogies you use to get this real for people?
I mean, that's the one I'm using right now, right? Like, do you want somebody doing that? I will make, I don't know, I use analogies a lot, but for this specific data thing, I think an analogy I would use would be, you wouldn't necessarily expect your doctor to go through every single meal you eat, right? Like you would expect them to have a high level idea of what's going on in your life, right? But you're not going to turn in a log, and you're not going to have them examine every plate of food before you eat it. And it's a similar sort of thing here, right? You are in the end responsible for your own data and your own privacy. That we recommend now a lot of times for people doing SharePoint migrations. We'll do a bulk migration, but I almost think it's better to greenfield it, right? And leave the existing data where it's at. And then instead of bulk copying entire folder structures over, let's like cherry pick the data you need, because there's also risk in data that you don't need anymore, right? Like people are data hoarders, and all of that data hoarding comes with other unintended risk.
I'm fascinated. I talked tonight to the Western Governors University Cyber Club. It's a little disorienting for me. Most universities have like a cyber club. Yesterday morning, I gave the talk for Harvard's cyber club. Tonight it's going to be for Western Governors Cyber Club. The disparity in those two things, that I'm like their February speaker for both those things, is just, it's crazy and awesome to me. And at the same time, I find myself having to answer the same questions. Everybody has the same concerns, and they have to do with the collapsing nature of what I think of in my head still as data structures and directory traversal attacks. I mean, to a lot of people kind of coming up in computer science and even in information security, there's no real differentiation or concept of like a file folder system and structure where you can have gated off pieces of information architecture. It's all just kind of stored in the cloud, and you trust the algorithm to go find it for you. Well, guess what? We got a better algorithm, and it's finding it for you.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's a lot of that even one of my guys yesterday, we were setting up NFS, right? Like for some backup stuff. And he's setting, instead of setting permissions on stuff correctly, he set a FACL that just allowed everyone to read and write from it. And then limited it by IP. And I'm like, you don't want to do that for a whole stack of reasons. And it went into a whole talk about, what those permissions should look like and what things should happen there. But much like new programmers don't understand pointers, right? Like new systems administrators don't necessarily understand some of those, more granular file permissions and stuff that us old people are used to dealing with, I guess.
I think to do this work in cybersecurity, you have to be somebody who is broad at a lot of stuff, but you do have to be deep on a couple of things, right? And I came out of Linux systems administration, and for me, I live in this sort of quiet, rhythmic world of terminals showing me the status of individual systems upon query, and being able to confirm whether or not something was or wasn't accessible. And the concept of how computers work, from the glass and metal they're built from, all the way up through the magnetization of sectors on a disk, to what does that mean? How do you read it? Assembly, like this is transparent to me. I understand it really, really deeply, and it gives me a wealth of analogies. But I feel like there's a lot of, especially students, that have really struggled with understanding how computers operate, because this was their first computer.
Yeah.
And I think it's not real. And the problem with that lack of reality is that it's collapsing the world down in this way, where there's both this kind of perpetual sense of ominous, vulnerability, and at the same time, just this being convinced somebody else is going to take care of it.
Yeah,
You know?
AI is making that worse, honestly, because now you can go ask all these questions from all this curated knowledge. But one of the things I asked actually in a talk I was at last week is, like, are we going to end up dumber as a result? Because no one has to produce any new research or new work now, because AI just answers everything, right? Who's going to feed the AI the new stuff to teach it? And I definitely feel like programmers, systems administrators, right? They have it a lot easier now. And there are reasons that it actually takes, on this brand new Mac Studio I have, it takes longer for Office to open, or Excel to open, than it did for Excel 97 to open on like my Pentium 133, right? It's like there's a certain amount of laziness that comes with programming, because it gets easier, and we use these higher level languages that are easier to develop in and have less errors, but they come at the cost of understanding the underlying systems, as well as, in many cases, efficiency.
Mm-hmm. It's reminding me as well of people's willingness to delegate that thought to systems. And I'm thinking right now of a story. Like, I woke up this morning, and I woke up because it was Deviant, like, cracking up in bed next to me. And he was like, babe, you got to see this. So of course, you wake up, you look at phones and stuff. And he shows me Air Canada. It has just lost a judgment against a guy who had booked bereavement fares to get to a funeral, and the chatbot he was talking to on Air Canada's website said, yes, you can book this flight, and then we'll give you a refund, because if you provide given amounts of proof that this was a bereavement flight. And so he submitted it, and Air Canada said, no, this isn't a thing. This information was available elsewhere on our website. We're not liable for what our computational assistant told you. And they just lost this in court in Canada. It cracks me up, because this is the equivalent of, you can choose one or the other. Either you can stand behind what the chatbot says, and you can let it, in essence, sign contracts for you, or you can make sure people know that it's not going to provide valid information, in which case, what's the fucking point, right?
Yeah. The whole, well, you accepted the terms and services by booking your ticket. At some point, that's nonsense, right? I'm actually glad they lost that. I too would have been cracking up about that. You definitely. There are a lot of challenges that will come from AI going forward.
Mm-hmm. I'm just imagining like outsourcing contract signature in a meaningful way, like as the owner of a business, and you're the owner of a business. Would you ever let your accountant sign off on your business taxes for you?
Not without reviewing them.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean,
because you're responsible for them.
Yeah, it's accountability, right? It's like I'm accountable for that thing, and if I'm accountable for it, I at least want some say, and at least the ability to review it. Like, if I very much trusted them, maybe I would get to a point where they would do that natively without me at some point or another. But it's going to take a while to get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's about having a fiduciary, right? Like having fiduciary responsibility for an organization. Like, you've taken on this personal responsibility, and you can outsource the some of the knowledge creation around it. You can outsource and get advice from people. You can get service providers to handle things like legal and financial counsel. I mean, this is exactly what people do with you and me asking for help with cybersecurity. Like, they're not going to have the time to learn all of what we know about how to secure systems or run information architecture. But the job of a good service provider, I think, as somebody who's done it for decades, is to be somebody who provides the right level of abstraction while still letting the other person continue to have responsibility. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's actually pretty funny, because our master service agreement explicitly calls out that we do not have a fiduciary relationship with you, explicitly because I am worried about some court making a judgment that I did have one, when the reality of it is I can make recommendations to these customers, but in most cases I cannot force them to follow them. right? So I do not want this implied, well, you're the expert, you shouldn't have let me do this thing that I didn't want to do, coming back to bite me. Like, well, you had a fiduciary duty to make them do that. I don't have any ability to make them do that. So we explicitly call that out in our contract, that I will make recommendations, but I do not hold that duty. It's up to you to make the final decision.
Yeah. In the exact same way that you can't guarantee that somebody, the only thing you can do is provide the tooling for people to use. You can't guarantee that they're using it in an honest way. You can guarantee they're using it in a way that the system finds correct, but not in an honest way, right? Like, you can't stop people from lying. You can't stop people from being human beings, and you can't stop people from being mad if they think they understand something and they don't. And I mean, it's super this right here. We've got a comment from a LinkedIn user. This sometimes happens when folks are on LinkedIn, have their accounts super locked down. We really aren't prepared to leverage AI. And, this is the funny thing. This conversation has been so much about AI, when in reality, there's so many more basic problems that we have just not tackled yet. Like, I'm looking at the Avanti stories from this week and last week, CISA's warnings and stuff like that. And like, the last headline was like, just turn this shit off.
Yeah. Yeah, we have, I don't come across it a lot, but I do. So you're a Linux background, I'm a Linux background, long time, using Linux before kernel 1.0 came out. And I still support, as on our MSP side, we support Linux systems for a couple of really large companies, and they tend to use Pulse Secure, or it's Avanti Connect Secure, or whatever it's called now. But that's where I come across it. It's like Fortune 1000, Fortune 500 companies. Scary stuff.
It's scary because these are the same kinds of errors that you and I and everybody in this field has been dealing with for the last 30 years, right? Like, the errors that we're talking of, the two major CVEs: authentication, bypass, and common injection flaw.
Yep.
Like, I just wake back up again in 1997 when fax machines still worked, right?
Yeah.
That's what's frustrating.
These code bases come from a time, and I use this analogy a ton. These code bases come from a time when you could have open SMTP servers, right? Like, you remember that? You probably remember that, right? Like, you didn't have to secure your SMTP server. People just didn't relay mail off of it, right? Like, the printer, University of Toledo here, I used to be able to, at the university, all of their printers had public IPs. I could randomly print to printers in computer labs from my house across town because they had public IPs on them. And that's not a world we live in anymore. So if you're dragging a legacy code base around that comes from that time period, you're probably not in a good place.
And the problem with that is I think there's a lot of organizations right now who they're either scrambling to catch up or they're not. And I'm not sure which is worse right now, as I think about especially regional healthcare organizations. So I think there was the recent settlement is it Ohio? Yeah, it's Ohio. So Dave Yost is the AG of Ohio. It's in Mediata, which is a healthcare data organization. And they just they experienced a breach of 1.5 million consumers' healthcare information. And what's worse is it's never the crime, it's the cover-up, right? They failed to do proper breach notification. They failed to tell people what was happening. And that is just, it continues to blow my mind that people think they're going to get away with it. And I just wonder how many people think this isn't real.
Yeah, but now we have a really interesting gut check reaction that's coming with that. And I don't know how closely you're following some of the stuff in the Federal Register, but they are pushing some really, really, really tight reporting to guidelines if you deal with the government at all, like 24 hours. And I think that sometimes we also risk going the other way, because I can't get talking about accountability and wanting to say somebody to sign off on something. I can't get my lawyers to sign off on a breach notification in 24 hours. And I'm relatively uncomplicated. So I can't imagine that this healthcare organization could even potentially get their lawyers in a room in 24 hours.
Yeah, I strongly agree with that one right now. And we're also paying really close attention to it. The one that we've been paying the most attention to is that October 27th rule from the FTC, which is non-banking financial institutions in the United States will have 30 days to report a breach of 500 customers' data or more to the FTC. Number one, non-banking financial organizations, that constitutes every construction company that lets you process, a credit check for getting your kitchen remodeled. It's every used car lot that lets you take a loan out for, and a 95 Subaru, right? This is the problem we've got. And those organizations, I challenge the notion that any of them would recognize they've been breached, understand that this rule would apply to them, or know what phone number to call.
Yeah.
At the point at which we're talking about this. And so one of the things I foresee, and this is gonna scare the shit out of you, it should, is I foresee a great deal of attempted liability transfer to the MSPs that should have known. And I'm curious
100%.
how you're handling that legally. What are you doing about it?
Yes, I'm not accepting that, right? Like we're attempting to contractually protect against it, which is the only realistic way I can protect against it. But that is 100% a thing that is happening. That's why, like, I'm a member of JCDC, right? I'm a member of the IT Sector Coordinating Council. And the reason that I give my time to these giant government agencies that I don't quite understand, and I'm often lost, is because I want to say, and I want to know what's happening, and I want to say in guiding some of what I will see is likely going to be stupid gut check reactions, and in trying to moderate them to the ability that I am able to do that. It's not the assumption that the MSP is way better off in many cases is probably unfounded. They're better than the companies trying to do it themselves, right? But they're also not in a position to own all the stupid risk that sometimes the end users do, because a lot of times we're not even aware, especially with, all these SaaS apps and stuff. Like, we are just now to the point where I'm monitoring SaaS apps customers are using, because now that I've taken local administrator rights away, it used to be they would go install some software package to do this thing that they could do. But now, because they can't install software because I'm doing my job, they just go find a cloud service to do it. So now I have a new cloud service that there's data sprawl into that I don't know about. And the Jimmy that did it in finance left 3 years ago and left all the data out there in the cloud service that then gets popped, and there's just no visibility into it. So I think that's definitely a thing that's coming, and it's definitely a thing that should scare MSPs.
Mm-hmm. I can see that. I also, we work with a lot of, we tend to sit often between cyber insurers and MSPs, because we're providing data on, the small businesses that want cyber insurance, and then their MSPs are trying to get it for them. One of the things that I'm seeing is a slow rolling just apocalypse of insurance capacity for small businesses, and MSPs and MSSPs are all already incredibly difficult to insure. Their customers are coming next. Mm-hmm. Like, it's hard, and I know why it's hard, and it's a difficult situation. What have you seen? This is a sensitive question, because you may not feel comfortable answering it. I can tell you right now, we have cyber insurance. I got $2 million worth of ransomware coverage after filling out an application. And determining that it didn't have form validation, by the way, because it asked me if we changed our passwords every 30 days. Yeah. And in the checkbox, I filled out no, because this is stupid as hell. Yeah. And without so much as a blink, they just issued me the cyber insurance policy. Blows my mind. They didn't even know. Yeah.
So our rate, we carry 5 million of Tech-E&O ransomware, and it tripled in price this year to maintain that level. And they told me if they were issuing a new policy that I wouldn't even be able to get 5 million. It's bad. But I will say that I was just talking about this with somebody yesterday. Everyone gets these cyber liability questionnaires, and the Travelers one, I think, is 4 or 5 pages long. It's the most common one I come across. Everyone thinks they have to answer in the positive way for every one of those questions. And so the pushback I get from the clients, well, first of all, I won't fill them out. I will tell the clients what we're doing, and I think they can answer, but I'm not filling that out. But secondly, not all those questions are actually risk rated, right? A lot of that's just data gathering by the insurance companies so that they can look at, when somebody gets breached, how they answered those questions to start to build risk profiles. So only 4 or 5 of those questions are risk rated at this point. It's MFA on admin accounts and remote access. It's immutable offsite backups, no RDP to the internet, and EDR. You have to have a real EDR or next generation AV. And I think there may be one more that's risk rated. The rest of them, they're asking them, but they're not actually doing anything with the answers. They might slightly affect your premium, but that's it.
Yeah, the thing that we have seen is there's about 6 or 7 questions, almost the exact same thing that you've noted here. I'll add to that. They want a financial control for transactions external that are over $25,000. And they want a list of all domains that are owned and operated by the company. And those questions, right? And I know that because we've implemented, for instance, the Ballard Agency's checklist, which is all of those things, not just for the application, but the process of maintaining continuous compliance.
Yeah.
All the way through owning that policy. And it's a wild challenge, because I've seen so many CEOs of law firms who look at that cyber insurance checklist, they close their eyes, they plug their nose, they check green all the way down, and they hope.
Yep.
And cyber insurers know that that's what's happening at this point. It's hard.
To my knowledge, I only know of one claim that's ever been denied because somebody didn't answer truthfully on that. They will limit payouts, but to my knowledge, they haven't really been denying claims yet. And until they start doing that, I think you'll see it continue. And as soon as people start getting claims denied, then there will be a lot more. It'll just go the other way, and it'll go back to, well, we have to answer yes for everything. And it's like, most of those questions aren't yes or no, right? Like, do you have MFA on all accounts? No, I don't, right? But I have compensating controls for the ones that I don't, because it's really hard to do that on Windows boxes in particular, right? Like, it's what you put Duo on there. Well, that fails open, right? Like, so it's some of these are relatively difficult unsolved problems. So you do a compensating control where I rotate the password to that account, admin account, like every hour, and then the access to the password is gated with 2-factor, right? And that's an acceptable compensating control in almost every case, but that is not yes, and it is not no.
We've seen the same thing with compensating controls, especially for things like contractors who have access to company information on a personal device. I mean, is that compliant? No, it's not compliant. Not on NIST, not on CMMC. But I mean, the federal government has had to figure out how to work with contractors, both as companies and outside of companies. And the compensating control for that is either consensual MDM on that device. Or rotating passwords, or a lack of access on any external devices to any sensitive information like customer databases and stuff like that. You may be able to see your email, but you're not able to get into DBs and stuff like that, or access network devices, that kind of thing. So, and that's an appropriate compensating control so long as it is monitored and maintained. But who's got the energy to do that in like a 15-person civil engineering firm?
We do that.
Right?
I mean, we do that for our customers, right? Like, that's
one of the services
we provide. Yes.
Yeah, and we got to talk about this, because MSPs at this point, honestly, Jason, the number of people who have stared at me in utter bewilderment, as I said, our customers are MSP, the number of people in cybersecurity who don't know what the letters MSP stand for. Yeah. As I have this conversation with them, I've had this, and they stare at me blankly, and they go, hey, wait, just real quick, what's an MSP? Again, what's the initialism for it? And you could see when somebody is like nodding along with you and they don't know what you're talking about, that thing. So both cybersecurity and information technology have to start learning about this interlocutory function that MSPs have. And MSPs have to start recognizing that they are the gateway to the backbone of the American supply chain.
Yeah.
Right. Respectfully.
100%. I think we started talking based on some things I said about, and maybe potentially the talk that Matt Lee and I gave at GurCon, the security community kind of hates MSPs, and I don't understand it, right? Because what's better? Like, even the worst MSP is better than Susie, the office manager, attempting to run IT for that 15-person engineering firm, right? Because at least we get, like, even the worst of us at least get patching mostly, right? At least Windows patching, right? Like, we get the very basics down. Maybe we start to implement password policies, right? And the good MSPs, we're doing things that are a lot closer to enterprise stuff, right? It's like, I consider myself a mid-market company. I'm 25 employees, but I take care of, 2,500 endpoints, right? So we internally behave like we're a 2,500 endpoint computer company, right? Not like we're a 15 or 20 person company, right? And I think that that's the big thing there, is that the successful MSPs are approaching it that way, and they're attempting to do the right thing. But generally, even the worst MSP is better than no MSP at the very small business level. Like, I'm going to say less than 100 employees.
I love that idea. So it blows my mind that people think about them that way. And yeah, Jones, you're super right.
He's 100% right.
Yeah, when people get disappointed, and there's responsibility on both sides, right? Like, you know, a doctor is not a silver bullet for your health, but it's certainly, you know, an upgrade to not having one. I mean, like the worst doctor is still going to make sure that your blood pressure is under control and that you're trying not to eat as many trans fats, right? And I think this is maybe a good analogy. It's with the analogy I'll use maybe in future. And the best doctors are there for you and proactively make sure that your health is tracking upward. Never perfect, but tracking upward and reasonable for where you are, you know, at your life, you know, in your life. And I think that's incredibly important.
I mean, it's tough, right? Because we have this situation here where, like, man, I would love to be able to hire Trusted Sec or Black Hills to run pen tests on my, you know, little 15-person engineer firm, right? But like their entire IT budget for the year is the cost, half of the cost of one engagement with those companies, right? Like, so the expectation that working with less than half of an engagement from your company, I'm going to be able to boil the ocean and like solve all of the security problems. I'm not, right? Like I'm going to make them, I'm going to do the equivalent of locking the doors at a house, right? Like you married to Deviant and he talks about physical pen testing all the time, right? Like you're trying to prevent crimes of opportunity. If you're targeted, you're screwed. Like if you're targeted and even if you're a 1,000-person company, you're targeted, you're screwed, right? You're trying to stop the guy walking through the neighborhood that's trying to see what doors open, right? Like that's what you're trying to prevent because he's going to go to the house next door that's not open. Yeah.
That's precisely it. I agree. And I love the perspective on it that what you're doing is you're preventing attacks of opportunity. Wait, no, now I'm back in my D&D campaign in the back of my head. So this is a lot of it is exactly like that. Is you're making sure that the doors are locked. You're making sure that the fence gate is closed, and you know you're maybe hanging up a sign outside that says protected by ADP. Is that true? But at least it's there. You started to create this concept of a defense in depth, and that means that you can begin to layer those defenses. Honestly, you know who I would give a cyber insurance policy to is anybody who uses the word Swiss cheese defense on an application, right? Because it means they understand what's happening. Yeah. You know, that nothing's perfect, but it is incredibly hard. I don't know. What do you think the solution is going to be I think it's going to be really rough over the next 5 years. What do you think is going to happen over the course of the next 5 years in this world?
Well, I think that it's getting, we have a problem, and that the problem is the same tools that are allowing MSPs to scale and get better at their job are allowing the threat actors to move down market, right? Like these people, they never in call centers, right? They have support, they're using automated tools, right? And so they're doing the same things we're doing. So that line of, what you did as a small business, well, I don't need you. Like I've not been hacked in the past 15 years, right? Like what I'm doing today is clearly working. Well, it's only working because the ROI of hacking you hasn't been there, right? But every year that ROI, the cost of hacking you gets lower, right? So that potential ROI they can ask for is higher. And eventually it will come a point where you are worth it for them to hit if you do nothing, and you will get hit. Right. So I think that over the next 5 years, we will have to continue to level up because we're raising the good MSPs of the world. They're raising that, like, you must be this tall to ride line, right? You got to get a little bit taller every year. And so if we don't keep that, momentum up, then the bad guys will outpace us.
I love that you're putting it in terms of the economic choice as well, too, right? Like, does it make sense to use Oracle or something like that as a massive financial processing system, an ERP for, you know, a 15-person boat repair company here in Seattle, right? It doesn't, because the level of assets you could gain and efficiencies you could acquire at that stage are far less than the price of the protection you're putting in place. But as the usefulness of those systems, as the efficiencies of using them decrease and the ease of using them increases and the cost of using them decreases, there's a line that crosses there where using something like a Cobalt Strike or, you know, finding somebody who knows how to configure Metasploit Community Edition is a massive challenge. It used to be a massive challenge, and now it's the matter of a couple $100 and somebody with some extra time for the ROI, the probability of making $100 an hour, honestly, on scams like this.
Yeah. I mean, I boil it down to, right, I can talk nerd all I want, right? Like, but in the end, I'm a businessman these days, and I'm a risk manager. Like literally as an MSP, my entire life is risk management. I'm evaluating the risk to me of taking that customer on. I'm evaluating the risk of the customer for the decisions they make. And then almost all of those risks end up being financial, right? It's like, I don't want to deal with the company that doesn't want to do the right security things, if only because of the reputational damage I will suffer if they inevitably get a breach because of it, right? And reputational damage is bullshit. I'm going to swear on your podcast. It goes away. Like the internet and the world has a very short memory, but I still don't want to deal with it. And that's the decision that all of these small business owners, they need to understand, is that, like, yes, correct. Doing nothing, it's worked for you in the past, but you need to weigh the likelihood of, well, back to our security terms, the likelihood of happening combined with the cost if it does happen. And at some point or another, those lines cross, and it's cheaper to defend than it is to recover.
Clutch our pearls later. I'm not even wearing pearls today. And at the same time, honestly, so I've got a lovely little non-alcoholic cocktail here, right here, but I'm just actually switch for this one particular one over here for a little bit of that Irish whiskey, as long as you've got something around you as well too, because I remember when we used to be technical. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
We used to hang out. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Swear all you want on my podcast. Why? Because this is the real world and I am not fucking precious here.
Yeah.
This is dangerous. It's dangerous
hard,
and it's hurting people to not understand that you can't stay safe using the same things that kept you safe 20 years ago. The techniques, the tactics, the procedures, they are upgraded, and so are your opponents. Genuinely.
Yeah, 100%. I used to be the exploits team lead of Delnet, right? And I've been dealing with script kiddies for, God, it's got to be 25 years at this point, and the script kiddies are just evolving.
Sorry about that.
Oh yeah. I hope I didn't get you arrested, because I got a bunch of them arrested back in the day. But yeah,
not for that. I've done a little bit of time in the back of a police car, but at the same time, like this is what I'm talking about. We've got people, and it makes me angry, genuinely angry, with like a righteous anger, to think about the number of people that are not safe right now because there's this chasm in understanding. And yeah, I'm a risk manager translating this again and again. And here's something that happened 2 weeks ago. We ended up kind of deliberately not moving forward with a customer. And it was a managed service provider. I won't say the industry. I won't say anything about them other than the fact that they said, what you're doing, if you ask these questions inside a small business, you're going to show what they haven't done yet. And that's worse than them not knowing, because then you're going to create the liability for them not having acted on it. And we don't want to know that right now. They don't have the energy to know it, and we don't have the bandwidth to handle it. And I was like, gently ceased to continue that conversation, because I can't with that.
That's the ostrich model. If I put my head in the sand, nothing bad will happen.
It absolutely is, and it's devastating to see. I feel bad for that organization's customers, and at the same time, you know, if you're looking at a small business that is telling you it's not safe in one way or another, it's the responsibility of that organization to do so. I come to this position as a security product company creator because of the experience I have as an MSP and as a pen tester, going back into the same organizations, onto the same unupdated boxes every single year, and finding the shit I left here and there the prior year's pen test. That's exhausting.
My favorite are the, clients of ours that, I've got a security assessment I've done in front of them, and I put it in front of them, and they're still running a line of business app that I've got a couple that we've mostly, I think they're finally gone now, but I had a couple that until last year still had 2K3 running because of line of business apps. And then they go pay somebody $40,000 to do a pen test for them. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, you know what the pen tester's job is? It's to get in, it's to get domain admin, move laterally, and create you a pretty report. Like, I can do that. Like, you know what? I don't have to charge you $40,000. I already gave you a list of how they're going to do that. They're not going to find anything, unlikely going to find anything that I already told you, because you haven't patched the easy stuff yet. It's like, let's go fix the easy stuff, and then you can pay your $40,000 to the person to find the stuff that, is in your line of business apps and stuff like that I'm not looking for. Oh, it mystifies me.
Well, it doesn't mystify, it frustrates me. It doesn't mystify me on at least one level because I've been the person consuming and paying for and creating reports like that, at the top level in security companies and in other companies that needed to purchase those things. I've sold them, and run them myself. And the number one most common response or reasoning behind doing that has, in almost every single case, been somebody at a mid-level in an organization that was trying to get the attention of somebody above them, trying to boost the visibility into a problem. And what has often happened is that the following year, that person's gone, but the same boss is there. And another person is coming in and going, they must not have understood what we said last year when we said everything is terrible. Here's another report saying the same thing again. And it's not getting through because what's the expression? It's difficult to make a man understand something when his salary depends upon him not understanding it. Right? That's the real challenge I think we're looking at here. And I think that is part of what's starting to change with new regulations and new prosecutions of people in public companies. It's not happening in private companies, but public companies. The prosecution of the SolarWinds CISO and the company as a whole is a super interesting one. And yet at the same time, how's the CISO's boss and the CEO not getting prosecuted?
Yeah. So the question is, did the CISO take the stuff to the board? If he took it to the board, then I would say that to me, that would absolve the CISO, and now it's a board problem, and it's the
100%.
CEO that should be on the firing line there. I'll tell you what, I've had this. I know the CISOs of, at least passingly know the CISOs of the big three MSP vendors. I'm pretty close to one of them, fairly close to a second one. I would not want their jobs right now. And I've directly told the one that I know well, like, I do not envy you because you're carrying around these giant, huge, like, legacy code bases that eventually you're going to have an incident and you're going to be the next SolarWinds guy. And it's a tough place to be. But I mean, you were talking about it. I've got a Fortune 1000 customer that I fired probably about 18 months ago now, after I upgraded a Red Hat 5 box to Red Hat 6 to run an ancient version of Cognos. And then they come back, they're like, our security scan says this is running Red Hat 6. It's end of support. We need you to upgrade it to Red Hat 7. I'm like, I had to sacrifice small animals to get this to run on Red Hat 6. There's absolutely no way it's going to run on Red Hat 7. And even if I could make it run on Red Hat 7, this thing's vulnerable to Log4j. What's it even matter? This thing has so many vulnerabilities in it that the fact that it's running on Red Hat 6 is the least of your security concerns. Stop checking the box and fix the actual problem. Pay Cognos for a new version.
Yeah, it's that. And I love the comment over here too. The idea of, what is this, getting senior man, this right here is really the challenge, is that we've got people that would rather pay to clean up the mess than pay to fix it in advance, because paying to clean up the mess has an understandable and an advocatable price tag. Prevention doesn't work the same way. It's more difficult to explain the ROI on it. I think one of the most effective corporate chains of reporting I've ever seen was actually it was a brief period of time when I was at Splunk, and the global security organization reported up to the CFO. The chief financial officer, I think in most large organizations, is most qualified to understand probabilistic risk and paying.
I have one of those, but then that comes with other problems. And the other problems that comes with is they live in this glass world where they won't even take a compensating control, right? They end up so far from practicing that they don't understand that there's a give and take here. And so they sit on this pedestal and they just yell orders down at you, and they don't understand the business. That's fine, I can do that. I need $1 million budget to be able to do that. Well, you can't have $1 million. I'm like, then I can't fix it. There's give and takes there. I often tell these companies, these bigger companies, give me 10% of the money that you will spend cleaning the mess up when this happens, and I can prevent it.
I love that perspective, and I think that's coming, because I think that coming along with these prosecutions and the new FTC regulations is coming an understanding that it's not just the cleanup. There's going to be penalties to the way you do business, with fines that are tacked on for doing a bad job. For healthcare organizations especially, they're dealing with legacy technologies that are unsecure, often vendor locks on upgrades based on pricing. or based on the capacity to serve X number of clients. I think it's going to be a fascinating world, but like really boiling it back down again to the responsibility here. I think that chasm between MSPs and enterprise and small businesses that need to understand things. I am a huge fan of CISA. I'm a giant fan. I think that the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency is doing a bang up job. They're one of the best organizations we've ever seen as an advisory body providing real service to organizations in this country. And at the same time, I love the Shields Up and the Secure by Design campaigns. And at the same time, I am seeing a real struggle for government bodies, even CISA, to understand that something like Secure by Design or good software practices in the cloud are not something that penetrate to the consciousness of the kinds of customers you have. And it's barely getting to the point where the MSPs that are our clients really take that into account at all, because we don't have those problems, right? If Microsoft has a bad day, everybody's got a bad day. It's not the problem of one MSP, right?
That's actually really interesting, because I've been to their offices. I've talked to them. Those are awesome people. Jen Easterly seems like an awesome human, first of all, like totally awesome human. Every person on that team I met are really awesome people. And unfortunately, they are hamstrung because the only people that can afford to have a voice are people that have lobbyists, and they're these giant companies that also live in these giant worlds with giant budgets, and they're trying to do giant things, and they don't ever get the perspective of the practitioner on the ground or the MSP, because you can't afford to be there. I mean, I spend money out of my own pocket or out of the company's pocket to fly to DC to meet with those people, right? But like, how many companies my size are going to be able to afford to do that, are going to be willing to take, 2 days out of an important person's time, plus several $1,000s to fly to DC to talk to CISA about the challenges they're having? So the information they're fed are by the Googles and the Verizons and the, Kaseya's and the ConnectWises of the world, that they just don't understand the problems that exist at the SMB level.
Policy is made by the people that show up to debate about it, is what I have seen. And I completely agree with you that it's unrealistic to expect a great number of these small businesses to grok the combined effect as a whole on their organization. I did the same thing, right? I spent money out of my own pocket, 3 or 4 weeks ago, to go and testify in front of the Senate about the Cyber Safety Review Board. And, I'm there with a trade repping, the 100 biggest companies in the world, this solar system, and, a dear friend who's an academic. These are good people. And it's the three of us. And I'm there and I'm like, hi, I'm here in rolled up sleeves representing very little tech as opposed to what's going on here. And, you can be persuasive, but the truth is that the people that are there on the ground arguing about policy, they're the ones that make a difference. If I was going to say anything on this one, seriously, Jason, like you're in Ohio, I'm in Washington State. For folks that want to know more about this, you would be stunned at how echoingly empty hearing room chambers are when it comes to cybersecurity, to information security around small businesses. You can literally walk into your state house and meet the representative who's talking about stuff like this, and give them, and book 15 minutes with them. You can do it on Zoom, but have this conversation with people. How have you been doing this in Ohio?
I mean, right. It's having conversations with as many people that are willing to listen. I do believe it'll be the case that, one, I believe regulation is coming to our world, the MSP world. But it won't happen at the federal government until we see it at like 20 to 30 states first, right? So like and to your point, at the state level, this is really approachable. Like you just need to have meaningful conversations with your representatives so they understand your struggles, and you have to get them you have to make them understand, because otherwise, for better or worse, they're going to take the position of whoever's giving them money. And the people that are giving them money don't necessarily have the small business best interest in mind.
I find that it's true. It's not necessarily it's a value neutral thing, right?
Yeah.
Like the people who are spending money and showing up. I mean, that's also on a lot of levels, you and me, right? Like we're willing to spend that money out of our own pockets to show up and have these conversations. like it means we're lobbying for our interests. That's okay.
Mhm.
That's the model of representative government that we have right now.
Yep.
But it does mean that, I mean, I feel like you and I have to have more of this conversation, because I think you and I are both like, we should get a fundraiser going and hire us a lobbyist here, like something.
You can't. I know before the show we were talking about CompTIA,
Yeah.
and they tried, right? And I know
Mhm.
Carl Palachuk with his National Society of IT Service Providers is attempting to do it. The reality of it is that lobbyists are very expensive, and raising money from individual MSPs is very hard. So what happens is all of these organizations take the shortcut of raising the money from the vendors instead, because there's less of them and they can get bigger checks, right? So instead of chasing 1,000 MSPs for $1,000 a piece, they're going to chase 100 vendors for $10,000 a piece. The problem is money talks. And what happens is whenever you inevitably end up with an issue that both sides have a view on, and right to repair is where CompTIA totally screwed it.
Yeah.
The people that are paying you the most money will always have the bigger voice. So it really needs to be a grassroots effort. It really cannot be driven. It really needs to be controlled against the dichotomy between the vendor community and the individual service provider community in such a way that neither one has an outwardly like influence in it. I think actually the Wireless ISP Association model, if you look at what they've done, I think it's a really good thing. They have very similar cost structures for both their providers and their vendors, and none of them have a vote over any of the others.
That's a great way to put it. And I'm remembering that it was a couple of years ago. I found myself, on God's side of right to repair, arguing against a CompTIA rep in front of Washington State's Senate committee. And I was like, what are you doing?
Yep.
What are you doing right now? Like, you are literally made up of a bazillion small providers who do this kind of repair. And all of a sudden you sound like you're quacking words from big tech companies. Like, God love big tech companies. I'm one of the people that helps provide those things. But at the same time, I am just really challenged to figure out how so many of the tech industry organizations ended up on the wrong side of things. It was an interesting challenge. Yeah. So I think I've really seen this kind of happen again and again. And I'm looking forward to having more small businesses and MSPs do this kind of advocacy. And what I will say is this. I've put some content out there to help people understand how to do testimony, who to talk to, and how to prepare written testimony. You know what I think I'm going to do, Jason? I think I'm going to say, I'm busy as hell, just like you are. You've done this in Ohio. I'll tell you what, why don't the both of us promise to train up somebody in our state and send them to go talk for 10 minutes to a rep, just like mentor them through the process so they're not scared or they know what to say and what's going to hit home. I like that idea. Fine. Then we will like virtually handshake on this and do that.
Right? Sure. That's really easy for me because one of my reps is actually one of my scouts' parents or in my scout pack. So I have a very easily accessible rep.
I like that one. That works just fine. I've got a good spouse who knows how to find people. So wait, that's not creepy. I just mean the office numbers inside the state building. It's fine. So you bang on people's doors with permission,
100%.
And you find a way to express yourself. And often it's the analogies that really get home for people, right? Like for the CSRB, it was about explaining why it was like the NTSB. Yeah. And that's really the powerful thing, I think.
It's tough. It's making them understand. I think most, at least at the state level, I won't pass judgment at the federal level, but I think at the state level, most politicians have they legitimately care about their constituents. They legitimately care about like the day-to-day challenges that people have. And I think it's very easy to get through to them. And because the cost to run isn't nearly as high, right? I think that once you get up to the national level, you start to cave to some of that pressure of the cost of running, and it makes it a little bit tougher. But at the local and state level, that's much smaller, so you can make a bigger difference.
Yeah, we got some excellent obstreperous and technically literate reps in the state of Washington, and I approve. Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and start wrapping this conversation up with. I'm going to ask you first: is there anything that we didn't get a chance to cover today that you especially want to tell people? I mean, our community of MSPs and small businesses that are trying to figure out how to get the basics right. With efficiencies and with respect for people. Is there anything that you want to get a chance to say to them?
As
well as how to find you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on my little /in/ I'm most active on Twitter or LinkedIn, because I find that I was too wordy for 140 characters, so I never really got into Twitter, and then they made it bigger and I was already on LinkedIn by then. So you can find me on LinkedIn /in/Slagle. I mean, the biggest thing I would say is, if you are an MSP, I go back to that Zelda, you walk into the door and it's like, it's dangerous to go alone. Take this, right? Like, if you are an MSP and you're not part of a community and you haven't surrounded yourself by other people, either peer group, community, LinkedIn group, even Facebook group, I'll even allow those. Go find a community of like-minded people that can help you through some of these challenges, because it really is game changing and it makes all of us better.
I am so glad to hear that, and completely agreed. All right. So last question we always ask everybody, and I've heard answers from all over the map: sea captain, astronaut, blacksmith. If you didn't do this job, what does alternate universe Jason do for a living? What's that job that would give you joy, that you imagine yourself doing when you're in front of a computer? You're like, I can't take it anymore. What's the job?
Ironically enough, it's also computer. I think if I was independently wealthy, I would independently run ops for like Wikipedia, right? Like,
Whoa.
Just for free, right? Like, I very much believe in spreading knowledge around, right? Like, I would just go find something like that, some nonprofit that's trying to make the world better. I can't see myself in a world where I'm not doing something with technology, honestly.
I love it. That's great. Jason, thank you so very much for being with us today, folks. You can always reach out to him to get the help that you need for your small business, and reach out and connect with him as well. Folks, don't forget, we've got Will Brooks of Fifth Wall coming up this next week. We'll talk a little bit more about cyber insurance. It might not be everybody's favorite topic, but it is an incredibly important one, and it's going to be core to how you run your business for the next half decade. Really looking forward to it. Charming and wonderful Will Brooks with us. Jason, thank you so much for being with us this week. As always, my friend, I will talk with you again soon. Folks, have an incredible week. Looking forward to speaking with you again soon. Bye for now.